somewhere in there, we thought, well, maybe we would check with like our favorite actors, which just were those two guys, were River and Keanu. And we got, Keanu was easy to get a hold of for some reason, and River was harder. And I think we had dropped the script off to the Chateau Marmont for River, but Keanu was just all of a sudden coming over and saying, I'll do it, this is great. And I think for both of them, they were sort of into the same thing. They were working in very big movies, and they hadn't really stepped outside of that, but they knew that they could.
Hello and welcome to My Hollywood Story. I'm Stacey Wilson Hunt. My guest today is the Oscar-nominated filmmaker Gus Van Sant, whose latest movie, Dead Man's Wire, tells the true story of a bizarre and often very funny 1977 hostage crisis that feels ever more timely in 2025. I've been interviewing Gus for nearly 2 decades due to our shared Portland connections. Most recently, we collaborated on a 2020 oral history that I wrote about his 1995 film To Die For, starring Nicole Kidman as a ruthless small-town weather girl who manipulates local teens into killing her husband. Needless to say, Gus was his trademark, very mellow, very humble self when we spoke in front of a Soho House audience about his stunning career as an artist and the path that led him to becoming Oregon's most iconic storyteller, with such films as Drugstore, Cowboy, and My Own Private Idaho. Listen in as Gus shares memories of the late actor River Phoenix, the wild ride of his breakout Oscar-nominated film Good Will Hunting, and the learning curve he experienced when he had to relinquish full creative control as a director on Season 2 of Ryan Murphy's 2024 FX anthology series, Feud. This episode of My Hollywood Story was recorded live at Soho House, West Hollywood. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, leave a review, and let us know what you think. Please welcome Gus Van Sant.
Thank you.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm very good.
Good. It's so nice to see you. As I mentioned backstage, I'm from Portland, and what Gus is to Portland, John Waters is to Baltimore. This is our most iconic artist. So thank you for everything you've done for Oregon
Thank you.
and Portland and putting us on the screen in such a beautiful way. It's very, very meaningful to us. And your new film, Dead Man's Wire, I loved. It's really, really fun and entertaining, and I can't wait to talk about it. It opens wide in January of 2026. But I'd like to learn more about your origin story, and it begins in Kentucky. Tell me what your life was like as a kid growing up in Kentucky.
I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, where we shot Dead Man's Wire. And one of the reasons I did want to shoot Dead Man's Wire was that they were planning to shoot in Kentucky. My family lived 3 hours west of Louisville, so I didn't really spend time in Louisville, Kentucky, but Mayfield, Kentucky, which had been hit by tornadoes the last few years, really decimated.
Was it a fairly rural area?
Yeah, it's a little town, like a Frank Capra style town, like of 12,000 people or something, in the middle of a lot of farmland. Paducah is nearby, which is bigger, where Lily Tomlin was from, and I just spent summers. My family was in Kentucky. My mom was a school teacher. My dad was a traveling salesman. And they relocated to Denver by the time I was 1.5. And so Denver was really, a suburb of Denver was really where I grew up until 6. And then we moved again to Mount Prospect outside of Chicago for 2 years.
And were these moves for your dad's job?
Yeah, he was working in the same company, but he kept climbing up the ladder and getting in, from regional, like traveling salesman, he would become like regional sales manager, and then West Coast sales manager in San Francisco area, and then eventually New York, vice president in New York City, and we lived in a suburb, Darien, Connecticut.
That's where Chloe 70 is from, I think.
Yeah, we know each other. We have some friends in common.
Wow. And was it hard to move around a lot and make new friends in all these locations?
That's just what I knew. So probably, I think, psychologically hard in a way, but good for filmmaking.
And what kind of kid were you? Were you artistic? Did you like to read? Did you like to be outside? What was your favorite thing to do?
I was pretty standard kid that up until like 11, I think. It was a lot. I was outside a lot with my friends, like combing the woods and throwing rocks and stuff.
That sounds very typical.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then at 11 or 12, I remember just a really sharp turn into like being busy painting. I started painting, and Chloe and I had the same art teacher, Robert Levine, who her mom knew really well, so she was closer even socially to Robert Levine, but he was my teacher, and was painting and sort of got us all, my group of friends, painting of all things.
And when did photography become an interest to you?
Just a little bit later, maybe buying a camera and taking photographs. I was printing my own photographs and taking photographs, but I don't know that I was excelling in photography. I was doing it, but I was more like.
How does one know if one is excelling in photography?
I wasn't happy with the photographs, so I didn't excel to the point where I thought, now that's good. It was always like escaping me, and then also I was using the family, as a lot of filmmakers, the family 8mm camera to make films, and then I bought myself. I had a job in the city, working at my father's company. And I bought a really fancy 8mm Super 8 French camera, Bolu, and
Makes sense because the French love your work, so this is in keeping with that.
So that was like I got sort of serious with that, mostly because artists in the New York area, underground artists or above ground artists, were like Stan Brakhage or Andy Warhol. They were making films. And I thought, so painters are making films. So I was really making films that were in line with Stan Brakhage, or, there were a host of filmmakers, Ron Rice, Stan Vanderbeek, the Kuchar brothers.
And what stories were you telling in these films? What kind of characters interested you?
They were pretty loose stories. They were usually your friends were involved. There was costumes, there was action, but there wasn't necessarily story. It was more art.
Concepts.
Concepts, yeah.
And at what point did you move to Oregon?
When I was a senior in high school, my family decided to move in the middle of the year.
That's the most cruel thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, I know. I was ready to graduate and decided I would go to a particular college in Rhode Island School of Design. And my family said, no, you're coming with us and you'll go to like the local high school. And I stayed back a year, and I was happy to do that just because Portland was a pretty amazing place.
And you were at RISD for 4 years?
I was, exactly, starting in 71 for 4 years.
Okay. What did you study there that really changed your view of art?
I think for me, I was trying to paint, and I was also in the film department. And so as a RISD student, you go through 1 year of freshman foundation, they call it, and you're not really supposed to be doing your own projects so much as doing class projects. And you were drawing lifelike pictures of nature. They had a nature lab, and three-dimensional construction, life drawing. You were drawing for models. And even architecture students that didn't know how to draw were like making little like scratches on the paper, and they were going through the same program. And the next year, your sophomore year, you are starting to branch out a little bit. You're joining like your section. So I decided to really concentrate in film, and made a couple of films that year.
And at this point, did you see yourself pursuing filmmaking as a career? Were you still trying to find your footing as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had sort of ideas of, because of the art orientation, when I was in the film department, I started getting more interested in quote unquote subverting the standard film business. And to do that, I thought you might have to like learn how to actually make something as well as the films that you saw or TV that you saw. And so I started to get like closer and closer to kind of like some kind of acceptable dramatic form. And I think instead of subverting it, I just sort of worked into it. And there were other the filmmaker at the time, also during RISD's period, 1972, that was the most influential was John Waters. And because he had gone out and with his friends and their own basement apartments made a $12 million film, which became this amazing film that played really well with audiences. And I thought, well, if you could do that for the small amount of money that he did it for, like other people could do it. And
lean into the shock value as well, as he did.
Well, I mean, I wasn't doing that. I wasn't attempting to do that. They also, a lot of the people in RISD, and specifically David Byrne, had come from Baltimore Art School, whichever art school that is, and John Waters and Devine, they all went to the same school. So there was this aesthetic that was linked to Rhode Island, Providence, Rhode Island, and Baltimore had a connection a little bit.
And at what point did you move to Portland and sort of establish that as your artistic home?
Well, I moved to LA after school, after Providence, and was here for I think 6 years, and then I made a film here called Alice in Hollywood, and I made a short film here as well that played a little bit in festivals. And then I just there was a story, Malanoche, which I decided to do after Alice in Hollywood, and moved back to Portland because there was a support from local filmmakers in terms of like equipment, and it was a real ragtag group of people that really wanted to make feature films, but they were really involved in one case, one guy shot footage for the Blazers, the basketball team. One person was the sound man for Industrials. There was another person, Tom Shaw, who owned a porno shop, and he made films for his porno shop. So he had equipment.
That is so Portland, by the way. So incredibly Portland.
Tom also like aspired to make like non-porno films. So he, like, some of these people had editing equipment and
so it sounds like there
cameras.
was a community in the mid 80s.
Yeah,
Portland.
and so I knew I could go there and like have a community to work with.
And for those who haven't seen Malanoche, it came out in 1985, and you wrote, directed, produced, and edited the film, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And it's based on author Walt Curtis's autobiographical novel about a lonely convenience store clerk who falls in love with a Mexican migrant worker named Johnny. And this film was absolutely groundbreaking for its sort of leaning into what you talked about, the breaching of sexual taboo, but also placing a queer relationship so prominently in the center of the narrative. How did you secure financing for this movie, and how was this movie received in the community as you were making it?
Well, I was in New York after making Alice in Hollywood in LA. I moved back to New York really to, my father was creating this, he needed somebody to work in a warehouse of one of his buildings. So I did that for a little bit, and a friend of mine was working in advertising, and I went back to a company that I had spent some time at as a summer job and got a job there and just saved up money. It took, I was gonna head back to Oregon to work on Malanoche early, but then I realized the paycheck at the advertising job was big enough that if I just stayed there, I would have the budget of the movie in like 2 years. So
So you financed it yourself?
I just like
Wow.
saved up my money.
How much
during
was the budget? How much did you save up?
I had $20,000. So it was during like the Danceteria Mud Club period that I didn't really go to so much to save money. I wasn't like going out partying.
And how was the film received? I know you applied to Sundance and got rejected. Is that true? How was it received in the larger community? Did people take notice of this debut from you as a feature? And really, it's in black and white. It's very, very novel in its approach.
Yeah, I had applied to the Sundance Film Festival. They had 2 other gay films. I was like, it was securely in the gay film category.
You were being sort of siloed in that space.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of original enough for the United States. There were a lot of gay subjects in like European films, but the U.S. that year was Parting Glances and Desert Hearts. So there were
Those are
like
2 of the biggest of the
bigger
1980s.
bigger
right?
films that Sundance said, well, we already have 2 gay films, so we liked your film, but we're overloaded. And but the Berlin Film Festival took it and showed it, and it was sort of like my breakthrough, at least in showing my film to audiences. And after that, I showed it here at the LA Gay Film Festival and the New York Gay Film Festival, San Francisco Gay Film Festival. And here, it opened the festival, and the LA Film Critics gave it a like sidebar award called the Independent Experimental Film of the Year. And I had found an agent too through the same LA Gay Film Festival. So I wasn't sure if that was good or bad. My agent was positive it was fantastic to like have an award to place behind Malinoche to like get the next film going, which was Drugstore Cowboy.
Well, perfect segue to Drugstore Cowboy, 1989. Tells the story of a drug addict named Bob and his wife who robbed drugstores to pay for their habits. And again, growing up in Portland, this was one of the most iconically shot films because you really showcased so much of the city that I had never seen on screen before. And the movie starred Matt Dillon, but I read that you originally wanted Tom Waits. Is that true?
Yeah, it was the project was sort of born out of making trips from Portland to LA, and my agent Kerry Woods was his name, who ended up producing Kids. He was at William Morris, and he would send me out to talk to film companies, and I had a couple of different scripts that I was working on, and also I had run across a group of novels by James Fogle, who was an inmate at the Walla Walla State Penitentiary in Washington, which is relatively near Portland. And Dan Yost, one of the fellow filmmakers from Portland, had a collection of these novels that he had found in a class that he took, where a well-known novelist who had written The Birdman of Alcatraz was teaching writing, but he was also connecting the students that he had with inmates that were also writing, because he was like also teaching in behind bars, and so those people in prisons needed people on the outside to kind of send their manuscripts around to get attention and get possibly printed as a novel. And so 2 of those were Drugstore Cowboy and Satan's Sandbox. And I started pitching those as manuscripts until like eventually realized that the manuscript itself was not going to help me, that I needed to make them into screenplays. So I furiously, like over 6 weeks, like turned both of them into screenplays and started shopping those, and that is what sort of became Drugstore Cowboy at a company called Avenue Pictures.
And obviously Tom Waits did not play the lead, ultimately.
And Tom, that was like my attempt to cast it to attract attention to the screenplay. And so Tom, very nicely, like he read it. It was like just an outsider filmmaker. He said he'd play the role and so forth. And so when I got the company Avenue to be interested, I sort of sprung this idea of like, great news, Tom Waits will play the part. And they weren't very impressed.
And how did Drugstore Cowboy solidify for you your process?
On Malinoche, I was making that film with like a complete storyboard that had, I had four notebooks filled with storyboards that I was able to use entirely in the film and like follow the storyboards, which was a sort of Hitchcockian style. And I had a crew of 3 people, me, a cameraman, and a sound girl, and maybe sometimes an assistant, like a PA, and then the actors. So we could move super fast, and we lit it ourselves, and I could accomplish the storyboard that was quite complicated, like 90 setups a day. And when Drugstore Cowboy, on the other hand, had 80 people in the crew, which was actually really big for a film of its size. It was a $4 million film, and huge trucks and so forth. So our average setups per day was 13 setups a day. So my storyboard that I made for Drugstore Cowboy was kind of worthless. And Bob Yeoman was my DP, who went on to work on with Wes Anderson. And I just had to refigure, and I think it was the few days into the shoot, and the whole production, producers and so forth, thought I couldn't handle it. That I was like taking my time figuring out what to do without my storyboard, and so I learned, just through reading about other filmmakers, Kubrick in particular, that they would block the scene, and then figure out the shots afterwards. So I started doing that, and it worked.
And if it worked for Stanley, then it obviously worked for you.
It worked out, and it became the way that I still work. Although I kind of always dream of going back to storyboards, but I do see the value. I mean, I think the way Kubrick was working, he could take his time. So he would block the scene, but might take a couple days. Then during those couple days, he was making like a shot list that was almost a storyboard, and he sort of had it all. But
he had the luxury of time, lots of time.
Yeah.
Right. And I'd love now to talk about My Own Private Idaho, a very seminal film for me and so many others, which you wrote and directed. Inspired by Shakespeare's Henry IV, the film centers on the relationship between a gay narcoleptic hustler named Mike and Scott, the rebellious son of a mayor. And of course, starring River Phoenix and Keanu Reeves. So I was thinking about this movie and really how meaningful it was and rare for 2 actors like River and Keanu to make a film like this back then. I think now we're getting used to more fluidity among straight actors playing gay roles and vice versa. But these were 2 actors on the precipices of just giant careers. What do you remember about talking to them about this film for the first time, and what excited them about making this film with you?
Well, I think the origins of the screenplay, it was quite a strange screenplay. Because of the Drugstore Cowboy experience, I was just going to go back to the Malinoche experience, and not necessarily with storyboards, but I had 3 different stories or screenplays that I had been shopping around, that during the editing of Drugstore Cowboy, I fashioned into one screenplay, because they all were sort of about the same thing, the streets in Portland. And it resembled sort of an E.E. Cummings poem. It was written on a Mac, which was new at the time, that you could actually type in different typefaces, and I mixed all the typefaces together, and it looked like a collage almost. And I would show that to people from studios that were just like, okay, maybe.
And how
next
was that
time.
received?
Yeah, they just, I mean, because as you know, still to this day, like courier type, 12-point courier type is like the only way to show a screenplay to an insurance company or whoever. If it looks too weird, then all of a sudden it goes off the acceptability tracks. So we were just doing it on our own. We had a little bit of interest from a company that was also pulling away, like decided not to do it. And at the same time, because we thought we were making the film for like $500,000, we had cast it with just local non-actors. And somewhere in there, we thought, well, maybe we would check with like our favorite actors, which just were those two guys, were River and Keanu. And we got, Keanu was easy to get a hold of for some reason, and River was harder. And I think we had dropped the script off to the Chateau Marmont for River. But Keanu was just all of a sudden coming over and saying, I'll do it, this is great. And I think for both of them, they were sort of into the same thing. They were working in very big movies, and they hadn't really stepped outside of that, but they knew that they could. And so this was kind of the project. And they were doing it together, and they were friends. So it changed the dynamic. But they said yes, to our surprise, and had a bunch of meetings together about what we would do. And it also got funding a lot easier with them.
I was going to say that probably overnight that shifted for you.
Yeah, it turned into, and Drugstore Cowboy had been playing out during that period, which also attracted, I think, River and Keanu. The Drugstore Cowboy was doing well. And we made it for like $2.5 million instead of $500,000, and it was really like a choice. And I used the old DPs from Malinoche. There were two of them.
So you kind of had your team waiting for you to do the next film.
Yeah, it was sort of a hybrid of. I tried to get the crew really small, but it was hard to do.
Well, the minute you have bigger stars too, I think everything gets a little bit bigger.
Yeah, it got bigger, and it had like a 35-day shooting schedule or something like that. And
after this film came out, obviously you were very lauded for your depictions of the gay relationship and what would, I guess, become the gay gaze, as folks say. What did that welcomingness mean to you? But did you also feel like, I can do more than this? Did you worry at all about getting put into a box when in fact you actually had other stories to tell? Was that a concern at all?
During Idaho? Or
after Idaho, and when people were really sort of lauding this film for its depictions of the relationship at the center of the story?
Well, it did well. It was known for like monetarily doing well for New Line. New Line was a little bit bigger company. They were excited about like opening it wide. I think I was excited about it opening wide, and it kind of became iconographic, even more than Drugstore Cowboy. And New Line itself was bragging about how a $2.5 million investment produced like $20 million at the box office. So as a business model, it encouraged people to not be afraid of investing in movies, and so it didn't really affect too much. I think it probably put me in the kind of box that I wanted to be in.
That makes sense. And now I'd like to talk about Even Cowgirls Get the Blues, which, for the record, I must say I actually really like this movie. A lot of critics didn't agree with me, but I really appreciate the care that you took to adapt Tom Robbins' book, which was one of my favorites. And it opened in the spring of '94 after premiering at TIFF that fall. And for those who haven't read it, it stars Uma Thurman as a woman named Sissy Hankshaw who has enormous thumbs. That's probably the easiest way to talk about the plot of this. And it went on to make just under $2 million, and as mentioned, the critics were pretty harsh on this film. How hard was it to pivot from Idaho to then suddenly being like, wait, you guys just liked me so much a couple of years ago? How did that feel? Was it hard for you?
Probably. I think it probably was, but I mean, it was a bigger film, much bigger film, and New Line made it. They financed it, and I really just sort of kept moving. It didn't come out until we were actually shooting the next film, which was To Die For, because were re-editing it because it wasn't playing very well, which the re-edit made no difference. And
Didn't fix the problems?
No. So it came out literally the day, that we were still on the set of the of To Die For, and I remember wondering whether the actors were still going to listen to me, which they did.
I'm curious, what Tom Robbins actually passed away just earlier this year, is such an icon. What did he think of the film? Because I feel like as long as he liked it, it's maybe the only thing that mattered, but I don't know how he felt about it.
Yeah, Tom was very supportive, and for him, like his writing, he's very eclectic and very kind of funny. He felt fine. We had openings that were really fun, and he and I kept in touch through the years too. He welcomed like any kind of like weirdness, and the release of Cowgirls was weird.
He was a very special guy. And you dedicated the film to River, who sadly, of course, passed away in October of '93. What do you most carry with you about your experiences working with him? How did he change you as an artist?
Working with him was, you sort of realized his value and his genius that made the other films that he was famous for. And I think that his family, half of his family, his dad was from Kentucky, and I always thought there was some connection between. So we became close, and he whatever like we were conspiring to do, I agreed with him, he agreed with me, and he really liked to go off the page and make things up, and he was just that was the only film we worked on, so we had plans, but didn't work on anything else.
Such a terrible loss. I think we all still feel it. And now we come to, if I can choose a favorite, if I might, To Die For, which is absolutely my favorite of your films. 1995, written by Buck Henry, the wonderful Buck Henry. And you were kind enough to indulge me during COVID as I reported an oral history on this film for IndieWire. And I pestered you with thousands of text messages and emails, and you were so nice answering all of them, so thank you. I wanted to make sure I was being correct. So this film is very unique in a lot of ways for you. It was your first big studio release in terms of budget, $15 million, I think is a pretty big budget. And it was the first feature you hadn't written yourself.
It wasn't until he was finished that we saw the script. I wasn't involved at all. It was, he went off, wrote it in LA here, and kept at it. I think he and Tom Robbins had some similarities in the way that they claim that they wrote. Like Tom always like finished the sentence before he moved on to the next sentence, and he wrote the novel sort of straight through, but it was finished by the end of it was completely finished. And Buck similarly would start at the beginning of the script, read up to the page where he'd left off, and he would write until he finished the next pages, and the next day he would start reading at the beginning and read all the way to where he finished off. So he had a similar concept. And the script was really cool, and it was sort of, we had been trying to make together the electric acid test, Buck Henry and I, with Chuck Roven as a producer who owned the book. And we weren't getting anywhere, and then this came up, and so we decided to do it together.
And Laura Ziskin, of course, the late amazing producer, helped to usher this at the studio.
Yeah, Laura Ziskin was the one that had the, she had found the Joyce Maynard book, and through our agent, I had the same agent as Buck Henry, she's, decided to hire both of us.
Incredible chemistry, I would say. And Nicole Kidman edged out actresses like Sandra Bullock, Patricia Arquette, Meg Ryan to play Suzanne Stone. And in my opinion, her greatest performance, truly.
We had asked Patricia Arquette, and she had another film, so we were going to wait for 6 months, which is sometimes a chancy thing to do, and which our producer, Laura, knew. And Nicole really wanted to play it. She was married to Tom Cruise. She had been in one of Tom's movies about...
I think it's Far and Away, right?
Stock car racing.
Oh, Days of Thunder.
Days of Thunder. they had done Far and Away together, but I think she was excited about doing something on her own. So she really was focused, and I think she also really understood the character because the character is quite evil. So she liked that idea.
She likes playing bad characters.
Yeah.
She does.
So, which was different than some of the other interested parties, not Patricia, but like some other actresses were like, why do we like this? Afraid of it.
I think Meg was worried that her rom-com image would somehow be sullied by doing a movie
which
like
is not
this.
a bad way to think of your image because she was big.
Well, I remember one of my favorite things Nicole told me was she had come from more of an art house cinema aesthetic in Australia, and she came to the US expecting to have Jane Campions around every corner, and she loved your work because it was weird, and that's what she really wanted someone like you to trust her with a role like this, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. So she was super prepared when she, to the point where she was almost like a second director, and she was like able to, like if I needed the kids to dance in the living room, she was showing them how to dance. So.
And of course, Joaquin would go on to play James. It's so stunning in that performance. I revisited my notes in speaking to Danny Elfman, who of course composed the score and you've worked with many times. And I was very, I really enjoyed this soundbite, and I'll read it to you. He says, I'm, quote, used to a lot of interfacing with directors. Usually around the rough cut, I'll sit and play music to see what they say. But Gus just kept saying, do your thing. At a certain point, I realized, he's never going to tell me what he wants, thumbs up or thumbs down. So there were moments I just had to say, come on, make a choice. Is that how you remember the process?
Yeah, that's the first time. The other films up until that point had been, Elliot Goldenthal had done Drugstore Cowboy, and it was the budget was so small that I think we just sort of sent it to him, and he sent us the score back, and that was it. The other ones were Idaho, for instance, was just myself. I got a pedal steel player, and he played along with the picture, and like the other films were like home composed. So Danny was the first person who was doing like regularly and had done Batman and so forth.
It had worked with Tim a bunch at that point.
A bunch of Tim's projects, which is where he sort of started out. And I was surprised he'd even accept working on our project. So yeah, he was in Topanga Canyon, and I would go out there to, listen to the score. I thought he would just make, like Elliot Goldenthal, make it and then just show up and we'd put it in, slot it in. But he wanted feedback. So yeah, he would, in his recording studio, he would have 4 choices and pick a choice so that he could go in a direction. And
has your process with him evolved over the years to be?
He still has that same project
okay.
where he has like an initial scoring of like 4 scenes, and there's choices. There's like, 4 or 5 different like directions that related to the other sections, and you would guide him that way, which he wanted, because I think you're like sort of the spirit of the film, so he wanted to like meld with that instead of get the wrong idea, which I was always hoping for just a straight ahead Tim Burton score, and he would absolutely never do that. I'd say, where are those Tim Burton structures and notes? And he kept them locked away.
Well, you and Tim are very different filmmakers too, just slightly different.
That's for sure.
And Nicole, of course, would go on to win the Golden Globe for that performance, which, again, in my estimation, it's her best work. And now, of course, we come to 1997's Good Will Hunting, written by, if we could ever forget, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, centered on a misguided youth who works as a janitor at MIT who has a genius-level math aptitude. And is it true that Kevin Smith was really the person who ushered the script to Harvey?
Yeah. So there's a long story about that project, because it took them a long time to write it. It took a long time for them to get it filmed. So it was Ben and Matt, because they were young, struggling actors, and watched Sylvester Stallone like star in his movies because he had written Rocky. Decided to try the same thing, and started writing Good Will Hunting from a scene that Matt claimed he had written in school. He went to Harvard, in his English class, he wrote the scene between Sean and Will when they first meet in his office.
This is Robin's therapist character, Sean.
Yeah, and so they wrote a screenplay and they sold it to Castle Rock, Rob Reiner's company, and they were famous for that because at the time, actors writing screenplays was a novelty, and they were on the cover of Variety holding their paycheck, and it was like 2 actors sell screenplay, and it never once. I mean, and also Matt came in to try out for To Die For, so he was somebody I loosely knew through the audition, and he was very good. He was a very good actor, and they spent 10, I think, drafts at Castle Rock over a couple of years. So years were going by while I was doing To Die For, and Castle Rock decided to let one of their executives direct the film, and Ben and Matt protested, saying they wanted a real director, not an executive, like his first time out. And Castle Rock said, okay, look, we're trying to play ball, but if you really want to have a different choice as a director, we'll give you 30 days to sell this, to take this into turnaround, 30 days to sell it, and the price tag, because of all the different rewrites, was $1 million, which for 2 young writers starring in their own film, going out and knocking on doors, was kind of a bad deal. Like, the 30 days was too short. And at the very last day, apparently, as legend has it, Ben was in Mallrats, and Kevin Smith was directing it. And Kevin Smith had really gotten on Harvey Weinstein's good side because of Clerks.
That's the best side of Harvey to be on,
Yeah,
as we now know.
Harvey was really good if you're on his good side. So he just said, you got to buy this script because this kid is they're going to lose it tomorrow, and it's $1 million. And Harvey just said, okay, because of Kevin, because he trusted Kevin. And so, yeah, he totally was one of the backbones of the thing. And and then a long series of different ideas. I happened to see it right when the script, right when Miramax bought it, because I knew one of the executives. And they sent it to me not because of, offering it to me, just for my own information, because it was curious, because it was this sort of curiosity. And it never, dawned on me to try and read the script, because I assumed it was an action movie or something. And so as I was reading it, I was impressed. And through Matt, we had cast Casey Affleck in To Die For. So I called Casey and said, "This is great." And he said, "Yeah, that's pretty good." They did a pretty good job. And I said, "Can you give me Ben's number so I can just say it's great?" So I told them, it was great, and if they needed a director, I would do it. And I think they had a few directors in mind. And Harvey, first of all, wanted to replace Ben and Matt. They wanted Brad and Leo. And apparently Brad and Leo were already, and they had to fight very hard and turn down millions of dollars from Harvey to retain the parts. So that was going on, and Harvey wanted Robert Redford to play Sean, and he could direct it and star in it. Then a couple of other directors of note. I think
Mel Gibson, was his name in the mix?
Which one?
Mel Gibson.
Yeah, Mel Gibson, same thing. He could star as Sean, direct the film. And Michael Mann apparently shot a scene with Matt and Ben and decided...
Michael Mann. Mm-hmm. That's a strange fit for the script.
Well, they started getting strange because I was in there too, and I had a issue about Final Cut, so I got tossed aside. So I was sort of in there between Mel Gibson and Michael Mann, and he shot a scene, and he thought they couldn't carry the film, and then Matt was saying that they would meet with anyone that came through Boston, advertising directors, things like that. They were just trying to get it going, and it was still kind of floundering. And I think all because they were playing the roles. You know, it was all of this perception, which to me was like a plus to have newcomers.
It's really hard to imagine anyone else playing those parts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Their connection to the community and Boston, that's so much a part of the movie.
Yeah. So to me, that was good. And then Matt got cast as the lead in The Rainmaker, which was a Francis Coppola, John Grisham story. And Harvey, as soon as that happened, he told Lawrence Bender, who was Quentin Tarantino's producer, get Good Will Hunting going. When after the Coppola movies comes out, we'll have the Grisham kid in our film. And so it was like so spontaneous. You know, they wanted to just step on it. And Lawrence happened to know through a friend of mine that I wanted to do it. So he just called and said, "You're doing it, if you still want to."
So without The Rainmaker, maybe this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, the whole
way.
thing was like a strange house of cards.
Very strange. So tell me about Robin. And is it true that you had talked to him about possibly doing a Harvey Milk project prior to this?
Well, Oliver Stone was going to do The Mayor of Castro Street from the book The Mayor of Castro Street by Randy Schultz in 1990, and he decided after JFK not to do another assassination film. And they were looking for a director, and inadvertently I was offered it through his producer, trying to pitch him a different script. And and then Oliver was, he really liked Drugstore Cowboy, so he was like, "Okay, you're in, come meet Robin." Like, just, that was also just like all very sudden. And we were preparing, we wrote a new script, and I had to admit to myself that the scripts weren't, like, the Oliver original script was more about the Dan White trial than it was about the Mayor of Castro Street and about Harvey Milk. And so the one that I wrote with another writer was also kind of like forgetting the gay street and the history and the people within it. So it just sort of, I kind of fell out of it, and I kind of got fired, and Robin left, and that story kept sort of living on for the next, 18 years or something. And then Lance Black, in trying to write a script for Bryan Singer, who was the new director attached to it, all that time later, he wrote his own version, having gotten a no from Warner Brothers to write the script. And so that existed, this new version by a writer that was writing not from the book, but an original take on it. And we did that.
Incredible. But Good Will Hunting would go on to become Miramax's biggest movie at that time, $226 million worldwide. And of course, Matt and Ben would win Best Original Screenplay and Robin for Supporting Actor. And you got your first Best Director nomination that night. So after Good Will Hunting, you made the interesting choice to do a shot-for-shot remake of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho in 1998. And about this choice, you said, quote, "I think the process of doing it was about the learning and not about the result," which I think is really interesting. So what did you learn from that experience, remaking Hitchcock's classic movie?
Well, for me, that particular, attempt at a remake, at a true remake where you're trying to actually make the same film, the answer was you can't really make the same film. But I think for me it was a result of like years, and still the business is remaking everything all the time. So years of watching Universal in particular remake, the Flintstones, like live action version of the Flintstones, just the Brady Bunch movie after the Brady Bunch had anything that the audience might recognize, they would remake. And I said, well, look, any of your films that have done really well, they will recognize them, and you could put new actors in there, and that could work. And you could just do it shot by shot. And they said no until we were nominated for Good Will Hunting, and then my agent was like sort of getting all these different offers from different people, and from different Paramount and MGM, and they wanted to know at Universal if I had an idea that they could maybe get into, and I said, yeah, Psycho as a remake, shot for shot, with new actors, and the answer was that they thought that was a brilliant idea, and they were willing to do it.
Did you laugh to yourself when they said yes?
Yes, because there's certain things you hear in Hollywood that are funny, but and that was one of them. But Danny Elfman warned me. He said, "Look, they'll kill you. They will kill you." He just knew, and I said, "But it's not really about being killed or not. It's really the the experiment of could something like that work? It's almost like AI. Like you're just taking an old thing and making it new, and could that system work?" And then it's sort of like saying, I don't care if I get beat up in a bar, and then you got beat up and it felt bad.
It's striking watching the film, and of course it stars Vince Vaughn and Anne Heche, both of whom are fantastic in this movie, how you can employ different actors with the same exact script, and it feels like such a different film. Like really, Anne's interpretation of that role was wildly different, even though she's reading the same lines. So I think as an experiment to that effect, I thought it was quite fascinating. And Vince was really great.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched it recently, but I should do that.
It's pretty fun.
Good.
And now I'd like to talk about a trio of movies that have been nicknamed the Death Trilogy. I don't know if that was your name for them or if others came up with that. 2002's Jerry, 2003's Elephant, and 2005's Last Days. And I wish we had time to talk about all of these, but I want to talk about Elephant because it's the most gutting of the three, shot inside a Portland school, and depicts the harrowing events of a school shooting, mostly starring unknown actors or young actors.
The Columbine massacre in Colorado. There was so much media attention about that particular event that I thought there was an area of investigation that could be dramatic and not documentarian or not journalistic, that it could be investigated in its own way. And so I was trying to pitch it as a TV movie that would be, something that popular that could play.
Like a broadcast TV movie?
A broadcast TV movie.
That's a very daring notion. A story like this on
yeah,
broadcast
I mean,
TV.
I thought it could be. It was a little too daring because nobody wanted. They were really trying. I mean, the networks were trying to hold on to their police shows because they were being blamed for too much violence. And I pitched it to Barry Diller, who invented the TV movie, mostly because we had a contact with him, and so I had a lunch with him where I was explaining it to him. And I think similar. He was also still in the business. He was at Fox at the time, I think, unless he was depending, USA maybe. But he was still in the business where they were having meetings with Washington and trying to say our entertainment hopefully doesn't create monsters. And so I didn't really have a chance until I met Diane Keaton.
I was just going to ask how she became attached.
Yeah, just through the years, a couple years had gone by, and I was still sort of interested in making something with that in mind. And by then I had made Jerry, so it became maybe a different project. But Diane got me hooked up with HBO, and Colin Callender had worked on the original Alan Clark film called Elephant. So he referred to our film as Elephant, which is why we called it that. And which was about a different type of problem, but similar, it had similarities, and to addressing a particular political hot potato as a film. And so we wrote a script, and the script was a little didactic, and I had just made Jerry without a screenplay, and so I tried to get out of the HBO Elephant project by saying I wanted to use no screenplay and no stars, and in black and white, very long pensive shots, and thought that they would toss me out. And it was funny partly because Diane's presence puts you in a kind of mood where you're in a Woody Allen film, And so me trying to like get out of this job was funny. But they said, we think this is great. They kept saying this, every new.
So you were trying to
idea.
get yourself fired, essentially.
Yeah, and they wouldn't fire me. And I said, okay, if you really will let me make it with no screenplay, with unknowns, with with long pensive shots, then I'm in. So we did it.
Amazing. And I'd like to talk about your work in TV, specifically Feud, Capote versus the Swans, which came out last year, and you directed 6 episodes of this Ryan Murphy anthology series, centering on Truman Capote and the aftermath in his social circle following his publication of a tell-all book excerpt. And in watching the series, I was stunned by the seamlessness of you transitioning your process to TV.
Well, the script was written by Brian Murphy and John Robbie Bates, who was the one that I originally met and wondered whether or not Ryan would accept an outside director to do it. I knew the story of Truman and his wealthy lady friends that he had lunch with all the time, turning on him when he wrote stories about them, which was a fascinating moment in his history, and his downfall really is, like, proved to be too much for him. And it was kind of this great, amazing story. And so they said, yeah, you can do it. And I think, yeah, the speed with which you make the movie or the TV show was daunting, but doable. I mean, I was able to do it. And I think the lack of control that's not, built into TV shows, it was sort of the least interesting part to me, because of just basically the final mix or the soundtrack was not really in my control.
So now we come to Dead Man's Wire, which you directed, and it's written by Austin Kolodny, and it comes out wide in early 2026. And it's a pretty wild story. For those who don't know, it's the true story of Tony Kuritzis, who entered the Indianapolis office of Richard Hall in 1977, who is the president of a mortgage company, and took him hostage with a sawed-off shotgun wired with, quote, a dead man's wire from the trigger to his own neck. What intrigued you about this story? Because when I'm watching it, I'm thinking, okay, there's like a Dog Day Afternoon aspect to it. Mm-hmm. There is something in the air this season about rogue men sort of taking on the system. I kind of feel like it's sort of falling into that process. What intrigued you about the personal story behind this? Because it really is a compelling real-life story.
Yeah, I thought it was like a true crime. It was like Dog Day Afternoon. It was actually fashioned after Dog Day Afternoon by the writer. It was an original story about Tony Kuritzis, a car salesman at sometimes a trailer park manager, who was trying to really kind of up his game and develop a shopping center. So it was a mortgage story about being basically he couldn't keep up his payments, having the project taken away from him by people that he loved, the ML Hall being like a father figure to him, turning his back because he couldn't keep up his payments. And so he just went ballistic, and for 4 days didn't sleep and just was, screaming at everybody, and like kidnapped Richard Hall and walked him across town, like screaming at the cops as they were following him, screaming at Richard the whole time that he was held captive, and was a real character, which was the thing that really attracted me was Tony, like his personality.
He's very funny. I mean, this is one of your funniest movies, which I know if you read the log line, this doesn't sound funny, but I laughed numerous times because it's told in a way, and it's sort of not a terribly tragic ending in the way that we've sort of, a lot of these movies could end. It wasn't this terribly sad conclusion, and he sort of got his message across to the world in a sense.
Yes. Yeah. No, he was very funny. He would crack jokes while he was screaming obscenities at the cops. He would cry and asking about their families, and he was sort of back and forth all the time.
He had charisma.
He did.
And speaking of Dog Day Afternoon, Al Pacino is in the movie. He has a small role. How did it feel to direct Al Pacino?
He was great. That was a one-day shoot, but he was really smooth and really had done so many things that it was almost like he just started
talking.
doing the scene, and like we were filming him. Yeah.
So in closing, what do you hope people take away from hearing your Hollywood story?
I think one of the questions is always like, how do I do it? What do I do? And I think George Lucas said the most important thing was persistence. And I thought, oh yeah, that's basically it. You know, if you stick around, hopefully things would happen.
And that's the part that most people don't want to hear, because it's the hardest part.
Yeah, it's kind of a drag, like, to persist after a lot of different failures.
Thank you for everything you've done for Oregon, for Portland, for filmmaking, for queer stories. We're so grateful. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
My Hollywood Story is a production of Hippolyta Films and Entertainment. The series is written, produced, and hosted by me, Stacey Wilson Hunt. Executive producers for Hippolyta are Sonia Slutsky and Wendy Green. Series producers also include Daryl Young and Janet Grayson. Our camera operator, sound mixer, and editor is Ramiro Cantu. Original music for My Hollywood Story is by Madi Gavriel and Jenny Carr of Moon and Star. Our logo design was created by Brad Mitchell. And I would like to give a very special thanks to Soho House West Hollywood for being the official new home of our show. We couldn't do it without you. This episode of My Hollywood Story was recorded live at Soho House West Hollywood. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, leave a review, and let us know what you think.